Let's toast the ones we've replaced, he said. Right there in front of the bank, the board, the new bloods, and the god-forsaken shrimp cocktail tower, he actually said it. And everyone laughed like it was charming, like it wasn't a ticking time bomb tied to a $150 million deal. I watched the ice melt in my water glass and smiled like a good little dinosaur. That's what they called me now. Den Mother, the relic, the paperwork priestess. Thought I was too old to innovate and too polite to retaliate. But what they never figured out was that I didn't stay quiet because I was weak. I stayed quiet because I was watching and waiting. Hey, quick thing, if you're already 3 sips into this story, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and toss us a like. 90% of you lurk like my HR department during layoffs, and honestly, it keeps this whole messy magic alive. All right, back to the fire. 6 months ago, I was the contracts and risk manager everyone came to first when something smelled off. I knew every clause, every subclause, every signature page that ever caused a CFO to break into hives. My initials were on the original vendor forms from back when we could barely make payroll. I once caught a phrasing error that saved us from a 6-figure lawsuit. Back then, they'd clap me on the back like I was some kind of magician in orthopedic pumps. Then came Rick, our new CEO. Rick with the shoulder tan and leadership quotes from bumper stickers. Rick who looked at a compliance dashboard like it was a magic 8-ball. He arrived with the energy of a guy who hadn't read a contract in his life but had a solid gut feeling about how things should be. Within a week, he reorganized my department into something called proactive integrity, which is corporate for we don't know what we're doing, but it sounds good in a deck. He replaced 3 of my best analysts with a former lacrosse coach, his buddy from business school, and a guy named Travis who once sold reverse mortgages on TikTok. I'm not joking. Travis wore sneakers to client meetings and kept saying things like just vibes when asked about missing documentation. And guess who was asked to train Travis? Yours truly. Nothing says we value your institutional knowledge like asking you to teach the man who thinks DocuSign is a dating app. At first, I tried. I documented everything. I flagged issues. I emailed polite reminders about Clause 9.4 and Risk Signatory Protocol. I even bought them donuts. But after Rick spilled espresso on a master agreement and laughed it off, papers for old people, den mother, I stopped trying to fix things. I started archiving. I kept my daily logs. Not in the system, mind you, they locked me out of that. Said it was part of the streamlining, but I had backups. Dates, times, versions. I saw the bank's term sheet come through with language that made my palms sweat. A clause that tied verbal statements during the funding execution window to operational intent. One wrong word, even joking, and the covenant could be flagged. I brought it up once. Rick said, Jesus, Denise, no one reads that clause crap but lawyers who live with their cats. That's when I knew. I wasn't training Travis, I was training my replacement. I wasn't on the team, I was the cautionary tale. Look what happens when you get too comfortable, so I got uncomfortable in silence. I printed things, I timestamped messages. I took screenshots. When I couldn't get into systems, I asked others to send me files for mentorship review. They did, bless their chaotic little hearts. And I built a quiet paper trail so thick it could suffocate a small animal. Then they stopped inviting me to meetings. HR called it a professional realignment. My name was dropped from the funding execution schedule. No hard feelings, den mother, Rick grinned during the last planning call. We just need people who can move fast. And yet, they still let me come to the celebratory dinner. Probably thought it would be funny. Living relic at the table while they toasted the next era. I wore my best blouse. I brought a smile and I watched, because I knew exactly when the execution window started. And I knew that if Rick said the wrong thing at the wrong time, I had one email ready to go. One little message. One timestamp. One truth. All it needed was the right trigger. And a glass raised just high enough to bury him. The email came on a Wednesday, sandwiched between a phishing awareness memo and an all-hands invite with a DJ emoji in the subject line. Team Reorg, Path to Agile Excellence. God help us all. The memo read like it was written by a caffeine-drunk intern who just discovered corporate buzzwords. Buried 3 paragraphs down was the real kicker. To optimize cross-functional synergy, contracts and risk sign-off responsibilities will now be shared across the strategic execution pod. That pod was 3 people. Travis, he of the TikTok mortgages. Mia, a rebranded office admin who once asked if net revenue was the same as leftover money. And Vince, who thought compliance was a department in HR that ordered posters for the break room. My name was nowhere. No mention of the woman who'd written the original sign-off matrix. No mention of the person who used to stay till 9 p.m. comparing red lines from 3 law firms because the CTO was afraid of indemnity language. They didn't even CC me on the implementation threads. I only found out because Mia accidentally forwarded me a Slack export meant for the modernization squad. It included a meme of a skeleton sitting at a desk with the caption, "When Denise explains clause structure." Charming. By Friday, I couldn't log into our contract database. My access card still opened the front door, bless their mercy, but not the secure archives. I got an apologetic message from IT. Hey Denise, just following the new access controls. Let me know if you need help onboarding on a Trello. Smiling face with smiling eyes Trello. They replaced our contract lifecycle management system with Trello. I've seen toddlers organize Play-Doh more securely. Rick, ever the walking smirk, called it streamlining compliance. Said legacy systems like ours created friction. What he meant was, it made it harder to fake it. The new team didn't know friction from fraud, and frankly, they didn't care. Mia thought NDA stood for New Deal Agreement, and once uploaded a contract PDF to Canva to make it prettier. Travis started sending unsigned drafts directly to vendors. I stopped sleeping through the night. Then came the disbursement file from the bank. It landed in a shared folder during a pre-funding scramble. I wasn't supposed to see it, but again, Mia sent it to the wrong group. I opened it. 48 pages, 3 appendices, and the kind of conditional language that would give any real compliance officer night terrors. Clause 9.4. Any oral or written representations made by executive leadership during the disbursement execution window shall be treated as indicative of operational intent and subject to covenant compliance review. That sentence hit me like a brick to the chest. I read it again, then again. One joke, one offhand remark, one ego-drenched toast. If it happened during the disbursement window, the bank could freeze the funds pending clarification. It was a landmine dressed like legalese, and not one person on the strategic execution pod had read it, let alone understood it. I didn't scream. I didn't march into Rick's office waving the clause around like a lunatic. That would have been suicide. They'd already branded me as overcautious. Den mother, remember? Always worrying about gotchas and what-ifs. Rick liked to say, you can't grow if you're scared of falling. I once muttered. You can't fall if you've already jumped off a cliff with a blindfold on, but no one laughed. So I smiled, and I started downloading. Old copies, final versions, signed amendments, timestamped messages. I organized a private archive, secure, local, encrypted. I pulled up everything I could find on the bank's funding covenants, every past email chain about compliance interpretations. I even printed a few copies of particularly fragile clauses. Paper, Rick. You'll miss it when the cloud goes down. I forwarded myself things under the guise of transition training. I told Mia I was creating a knowledge base. She thanked me with a gif of opera clapping. Meanwhile, Travis ordered $800 in branded pens for the deal signing. The more I watched, the more I saw how hollow everything had become. Policies were written with typos, signatures missing dates, approvals made via Slack emojis. They weren't just sloppy, they were dangerous. And they were heading into a $150 million deal with a major bank like it was a birthday brunch. I could have left. I thought about it, but something in me refused, not out of spite, not even for revenge, but because someone had to know. Someone had to remember what integrity looked like. Even if they thought I was irrelevant, even if they called me den mother like I was some HR specter who smelled like copier ink and regret, they wanted a new era. I was going to give them one. I brought it up over lunch, casual, measured, like I was just making conversation over a microwave burrito in the break room while someone's earbuds leaked top 40 garbage and the Keurig wheezed like it needed CPR. So, clause 9.4 in the disbursement agreement? I said to Travis, who was slouched across from me, drinking a protein shake that smelled like regret and chalk. There's language in there about verbal representation during the execution window. If someone says the wrong thing during that time, the bank could technically interpret it as binding. He blinked, twice. Then he smiled like I'd just explained the concept of electricity to a sandwich. Denise, he said, pausing to flex his jaw, which I swear he thinks helps his credibility. No one reads that clause crap. It's just legal noise. Banks gotta make everything sound scary. If we worried about every line in these things, we'd never get anything done. I felt my eyelid twitch. Before I could respond, Mia burst in holding a glass of Merlot like we were in a Napa vineyard and not the 10th floor of a mid-tier corporate office. She waved a draft copy of the funding agreement, printed, mind you, and set it down right on a damp counter that had definitely not been wiped since the Reagan administration. Then she spilled her wine. It splashed across the table and soaked through the pages like it was baptizing the entire document in pure red ignorance. "Onuo," she said in that sing-song voice of people who have never been held accountable for a single adult decision. "Whatever. We've got it in the drive, right?" She laughed. Travis laughed. I stared at the now-ruined clause 9.4 as the ink bled into pulp. It looked like a crime scene. "Fitting. Lighten up, Denise," Mia said. "It's not like we're mailing this to the Queen." She meant it as a joke, I think. That afternoon, I got a calendar invite from HR titled Mentorship Opportunities, Building the Next-Gen Team. I'd been in this game long enough to know what it really meant. You're being sunsetted. Mentorship was corporate hospice care. They wanted me to swaddle the children before they wheeled me into the broom closet and quietly erased my login credentials. The meeting was led by Trisha, our HR director and chief dispenser of passive-aggressive wisdom. She wore her usual expression of tight-lipped sympathy, like she was trying to sell me a coffin with a view. "Denise, your experience is so valuable. We really think you can nurture this new team into a place of confidence and independence." I bit my cheek, I smiled, I nodded like a Stepford ghost. She kept saying words like guidance and support and succession. She mentioned a timeline. I mentally noted the phrasing. Vague, noncommittal. They didn't want me to quit, they wanted me to disappear slowly enough that I wouldn't sue. I walked out of HR's little padded dream world and back to my desk, where my email inbox now featured an enthusiastic message from Travis titled, "Can you sign off on this contract before lunch?" Smiling face with smiling eyes attached was a Google Doc, with 5 different untracked versions. No metadata, no counterparty initials, and a signature block that just said approved by the team. My mouse hovered over the reply button for a full 5 seconds, then I closed the window. That's when I knew no more corrections, no more warnings, no more saving them from themselves. I made a new folder on my personal drive. I named it Frosting because if anyone ever saw it, they'd think it was about cakes or birthdays. Inside, I started archiving everything. Emails, contract drafts, Slack messages, screenshots of edits, file timestamps, you name it. Every time Travis changed language in a file, I saved both versions. Every time Mia forwarded something to the wrong vendor, I logged it. I began copying the metadata of key files and quietly noting the modification history. I didn't raise a fuss. I didn't push back. I just watched and saved. There's a certain kind of power in being the only one who remembers how things used to be done correctly. It's not flashy. It's not loud, but it's real. And when the flashy, loud people start crashing into each other like drunk bumper cars, that quiet memory becomes lethal. The next week, the CEO held an all-hands meeting about the upcoming funding dinner, called it a celebration of evolution, said we were entering a new chapter defined by boldness, disruption, and speed. I stood in the back of the room, arms folded, watching him talk like he was auditioning for commercial selling overpriced bourbon. People cheered. Someone popped a bottle of Prosecco. Mia cried. Travis dabbed his eyes with a napkin like he was watching Field of Dreams. I smiled. And when the confetti cannon went off, yes, a real one indoors, I pulled out my phone and checked the timestamp. Then I filed it away. The restaurant was one of those try-hard places where the lights are dim enough to hide the price tags, and the food arrives on wooden planks, like we're all Vikings reenacting a $150 million deal with bone marrow and Kraft butter. Rick picked it, of course. Said it was where real closers eat. Half the strategic execution pod didn't even know how to pronounce half the menu. Mia asked if foie gras was vegan. Travis tried to order a vodka cranberry shaken, like in the movies. It was supposed to be a pre-closing celebration, a soft launch of our funding victory. The bank's disbursement team was prepping for the transfer, and Rick, armed with what I can only describe as pathological optimism, called it the victory lap before the tape breaks. His words. They sat me next to the wall, far from the center. Close enough to hear the jokes, but not close enough to interrupt them. Perfect? The mood was loose, too loose. Travis had already removed his blazer and unbuttoned his collar like we were in a Cialis commercial. Mia was taking selfies with the artisanal olives. Vince was live tweeting the historic moment, which was interesting, since no one had explained the NDAs to him yet. And then Rick said it, between bites of some fermented nonsense on toast. He leaned back in his chair and raised his wine glass like he was baptizing the moment in Pinot Noir. He grinned at the team and said, clear as day, we really bluffed through that due diligence, huh? They didn't ask about half the stuff I thought they would. That's a win in my book. There was laughter, not nervous laughter. The full-bellied, clapping kind. Mia damn near snorted. I didn't laugh. I excused myself, phone in hand, and walked calmly to the restroom, ignoring the smell of cedar-oiled diffusers and overpriced soap, and pulled up the funding agreement again. I'd read it 100 times, but now I searched with surgical precision. There it was again on page 22. Same clause, same stakes. Clause 9.4. Any oral or written representations made by authorized executive leadership during the execution window shall be treated as statements of operational intent, and subject to review as part of covenant integrity. Execution window. I scrolled to the definitions section. They were clear down to the hour. The window opened the moment the disbursement protocol was initiated, which had already happened earlier that day, and remained open until final wire confirmation from the bank. Which meant that toast, that smug little we bluffed through at Gem, it was live. And it was potentially covenant violating. I stared at the screen as the buzz of laughter echoed down the hallway from the dining room. Somewhere back there, Rick was probably making another joke, unaware that every syllable might cost us everything, or maybe he was aware and didn't care. Either way, I now had something better than suspicion. I had the clause, I had the time, and now I had motive. I returned to the table, calm, smiling. Sat down, poured myself a glass of water, not a sip of alcohol, not one drop. I wanted my mind sharp. I tapped a note into my phone, 9:13 p.m. Rick toast about bluffing due diligence during execution window. I'd already memorized the tone of his voice, the inflection, the way Mia had leaned into him laughing. I could replay it in my mind like it was surveillance footage. I didn't need a recording. I needed precision. I needed timestamps. I needed corroboration if it came to that. They kept laughing. Travis started talking about hiring a DJ for the wire confirmation party. Vince made a spreadsheet of potential balloon colors for the post-funding bash. Mia ordered another round of sangria on the company, even though we were already over budget. And Rick talked about buying a boat. Maybe I'll name it Covenant, just to be ironic, he said, smirking at his own joke. I mentally underlined that line in red. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze of cocktails and delusion. I remained quiet. I played my role, smiled at the right moments, asked a question or two about dessert options, nodded when someone mentioned culture. But inside, I had crossed a threshold. I was no longer the sidelined den mother with an archive. I was something else now. I was the witness, the recorder, the trap builder. They didn't know it, but the fuse had been lit, and every word Rick spoke with that drink in his hand was a match tossed toward the powder keg. I went home that night, booted up my personal laptop, and added the dinner note to the frosting folder. I backed it up twice, once on a drive in my desk drawer, once to a secure cloud vault under a random file name, April Gift List 2018. XLSX, let them snoop. All they'd find was a fake registry and a long game. Tomorrow, I'd be asked to review the logistics doc for the disbursement call. And tomorrow, I'd nod along. Because every shipwreck needs a quiet passenger who knows exactly when to jump. I drafted the email 3 days before the celebration. It sat in my drafts folder like a loaded revolver with the safety on, waiting. No accusations, no dramatics, just a quiet inquiry wrapped in courtesy with a few documents attached. The subject line was intentionally dull. Clause 9.4 Clarification Timing of Representations. The recipient? A woman named Jill Harden, Senior Risk Counsel at the bank. I'd met her once years ago during a minor vendor dispute. She'd complimented my precision. I never forgot that. The body of the email was clinical. 4 sentences. Hi Jill, hope all is well. I wanted to flag clause 9.4 in the disbursement agreement, as there may be potential confusion regarding verbal representations made during the active execution window. I've attached my notes and timestamps in case review is warranted. Please let me know if further clarity is needed. Best, Denise Carter attached were 2 PDFs, one with highlighted sections of the agreement, another with a table listing key events, their timestamps, and attendees. There was no editorializing, just facts, just accountability. I left the cursor hovering over the send button more times than I could count that week. Each time I reminded myself, not yet, not until he handed me the match. And I knew he would. The celebration was held in the newly renovated atrium, all glass and polished concrete, with a rented bar and fake Edison bulbs that gave everyone the complexion of a lightly seared steak. The room reeked of catered success. Flutes of champagne, mini crab cakes, someone playing Coldplay on an electric cello. Rick spared no expense for his own parade. They printed banners that said New Horizons, Bold Beginnings, and lined the perimeter with framed headshots of the new team. I wasn't on the wall, of course not. But someone had used an old picture of Travis where his name tag was crooked, and I took a small, petty joy in that. The board was there. Investors mingled. A few of the bank's junior reps wandered through with that half-interested look of people trying to decide if the free booze was worth the awkward networking. I stuck to water again, always water. I stood by the punch bowl like a silent gargoyle while Travis and Vince reenacted a tick-tock dance in dress shoes. Mia wore a sequin jacket and kept calling herself the compliance queen. At one point, she actually curtsied. I didn't say much, just watched, waited. The countdown had started the moment the disbursement protocol activated that morning. From that point forward, every statement made by executive leadership was on the record, legally, contractually, and irrevocably. Rick had been schmoozing near the corner, grinning like a cartoon mayor. When he saw the bank's lead rep near the stage, he stepped up, tapped his glass with a salad fork, and raised his voice just enough to hush the crowd. "This is a big one," he said, beaming like he was about to propose to himself. "A deal this size doesn't happen without taking a few risks. And yeah, we made some bold calls, but look at us now." Murmurs of agreement, Travis whooped. Rick looked straight at the crowd, lifted his champagne, and said it, just like I knew he would. "Let's toast the ones we've replaced." That was it, no hesitation. I took out my phone, opened the draft, and tapped send. One click, one timestamp. 8:46 p.m., right as his glass clinked against Mia's. I watched the screen blink once, message sent. Then I looked up and smiled, genuine calm, like I was truly enjoying the party. Rick had no idea he'd just detonated his own parachute mid-flight. The rest of the toast was a blur. People cheered. Someone sprayed Prosecco like we'd won the Super Bowl. Mia cried again. The electric cello guy played something vaguely triumphant. And Rick walked off stage like he'd just negotiated peace in the Middle East. Meanwhile, Jill Harden was about to check her inbox. I left the party early, told them I had early meetings. Nobody noticed. Travis was too busy DMing someone from the bank. Vince was arguing with the bartender about branding the cocktail names. On the way out, I passed the banner again. Bold Beginnings. Felt about right. Because boldness without comprehension isn't leadership. It's recklessness with better lighting. And I just put it under a microscope. At 7:46 the next morning, my office door creaked open like it was scared to bother me. I wasn't surprised. I'd been at my desk since 6:30, sipping gas station coffee and reviewing the newswire alerts like it was any other Tuesday. I even watered my office fern, Gerald, who'd somehow survived 3 regime changes and a mold outbreak. We were both survivors, Gerald and me. Outside, the building buzzed like a kicked beehive. The kind of tension that doesn't start with shouting, it starts with silence. Phones not ringing, Slack threads stalling mid-joke, IT pretending to troubleshoot things they know aren't broken. I heard Travis say vibes are weird as he passed by my door. He wasn't wrong. The knock came at 7:51. It was Vince, pale, sweaty. Hair stuck to his forehead like he'd been crying in a server room. "Have you seen Are You Online? I mean, can you get into the Treasury portal?" he asked, voice already cracking. I didn't blink, I haven't tried. "They're locked out," he whispered as if the walls had ears. "Rick's freaking out. He thinks someone hacked our credentials." Of course he did. At 8:03, Rick barreled past my office like a rhino in a dress shirt, barking something about firewalls and vendor sabotage. He was on the phone with IT, blaming them for screwing the biggest moment of our fiscal year. I heard him say, "How the hell do you lose $150 million? Like the money had slipped between couch cushions. I logged in, slowly, calmly. Treasury portal locked. Then, right on schedule, came the email. From internal counsel at Bank Secure Com to CFO at our company Com, subject, urgent. Clause 9.4 disbursement hold pending clarification, dear CFO name. You're currently reviewing a potential issue related to Clause 9.4 of the disbursement agreement. As part of our standard risk protocol, funds have been temporarily frozen while we assess possible covenant misrepresentation during the execution window. Specifically, we are requesting a timestamped log or recording of any executive statements made during the window between 4:00 p.m. and 10:00 p.m. yesterday evening. Please provide written confirmation of all public or internal remarks issued during that period by authorized leadership. Regards, Bank Risk and Compliance Counsel. I could almost hear the blood drain from the CFO's face as he read it. He was a quiet man, meticulous, the kind who corrected grammar in internal memos and kept extra copies of everything in a fireproof box under his desk. The idea that a toast, might void the entire deal. That would be his nightmare, and it was unfolding in real time. At 8:17, I saw the CFO pass Rick a printed copy of the email. Rick naturally scoffed. "This is overkill," I heard him say. "Clause 9.4 is lawyer nonsense. They can't actually freeze funds because of a joke." But his voice cracked at the end of the sentence. "Get legal on the phone," he snapped. "And where the hell is Denise? She's the only one who reads this crap." I almost laughed. I was in my office the entire time, door open. No one thought to knock. By 8:30, Treasury sent out a company-wide alert, temporary issue accessing disbursement systems. Our teams are investigating. No mention of the bank, no mention of clause violations, just vague chaos in corporate wrapping. Meanwhile, my inbox stayed silent. Jill hadn't responded, not yet, but she didn't need to. The reaction was enough. The funds were frozen. The fuse was burning. HR tiptoed down the hallway. I heard whispered fragments, contractual language, internal audit, timeline alignment. The same office that had practically forgotten I existed now suddenly felt my absence like a missing stare. I opened my frosting folder. Organized, dated, annotated. I double-checked the timestamp on my sent email, 8:46 p.m. I'd even geotagged it. The email was sent from the exact location of the funding celebration. Same IP as the Atrium Wi-Fi. Same network they all used to upload photos of crab cakes and company hashtags. There was no room for spin. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, Rick stood in the center of the executive floor, arms crossed, jaw clenched, surrounded by legal, HR, and a visibly nauseous Vince. "We need to confirm what was said. When? And by whom?" the CFO announced. Someone muttered, "What even is Clause 9.4? I sipped my coffee and said nothing. At 10:07 a.m., the emergency meeting invite hit our inboxes like a defibrillator to the spine. Subject, urgent exec attendance required, disbursement issue location, conference room /Zoom link attached time, 10:15 a.m. sharp, no agenda, no context. Just panic dressed up in bold font and corporate silence. I walked in exactly at 10:14. Not early, not late. Rick was already pacing near the window like a man trying to outrun his own reflection. His shirt was untucked, and for the first time since he took the throne, he wasn't smiling. Travis sat stiff as plywood in a swivel chair, cheeks blotchy, scrolling through Slack like maybe he could meme his way out of this. Mia kept sipping water with trembling hands, mascara already fleeing for the exits. The CFO was pale, sweating through his collar. Man who looked like he'd aged 3 fiscal quarters overnight. And in the center of the room, facing a 60-inch TV, was the bank's lead counsel, beamed in via Zoom. A man named Daniel Strickland. Not flashy, not animated, just surgical, like the type of lawyer who kills you with footnotes and silence. He adjusted his glasses and spoke without greeting. We've initiated a covenant hold based on potential misrepresentation during the execution window, he said, voice as flat as a ledger. This is not punitive, it's procedural, but depending on what we uncover, it may become permanent. Rick chuckled, a shallow, forced kind of laugh. Come on, Daniel, this is all a bit dramatic, isn't it? Some overzealous intern at your end reads a clause and freaks out. Let's not turn a toast into a tribunal. Daniel didn't blink. Instead, he reached down, lifted a piece of paper into view, and held it up to the camera. Printed email, my email. And just like that, the laughter died in Rick's throat. For reference, Daniel said calmly, this was sent at 8:46 p.m., precisely during the disbursement execution window. It includes Clause 9.4, annotations, and a request for clarification. It was submitted from the event's IP address, logged under your corporate network. Can someone confirm who authored this? Silence. Then, all eyes swiveled toward me. I didn't flinch, I simply nodded once. That was me. Daniel didn't thank me, just moved on. Mr. Reeves, he said, turning back to Rick, can you confirm the exact time of your celebratory remarks? Rick blinked. It was a toast, a joke. People say things at parties. It wasn't a formal statement. Daniel held up another document, this one with a printed transcript pulled from a tagged social media video. Vince's post, no doubt. Caption read, History in the Making. Hash funded and free hash new era the video title. Rick's toast 8:46 p.m. The room contracted. No air, no motion, just the flicker of the screen and the ticking of the wall clock. The CFO reached for a glass of water and missed. His hand shook so hard, the glass tipped and rolled off the table with a dull clink. Daniel continued. The phrase, let's toast the ones we've replaced, when stated during an execution window, and in the presence of authorized agents and internal staff, qualifies under the terms outlined in 9.4. We now require a formal position statement from the company to determine intent. Rick tried again. It was nothing. Banter. Off the cuff, you're overinterpreting. Daniel's face remained unmoved. That's not your call. The room held its breath. No one moved. No one spoke. Even Travis, normally a geyser of bad takes and gifs, sat perfectly still, like he finally understood what stakes felt like. And me? I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I didn't lean back and bask in the fallout like some Bond villain. I just watched, not coldly, not cruelly, just with precision, the way a scientist watches a chemical reaction unfold. I'd set the terms. I'd followed the rules. They're the ones who lit the match with their own arrogance. Rick turned toward the CFO, whispering something frantic and low. The CFO shook his head. Still pale, jaw tight? He looked like a man being asked to chew glass. Daniel closed with one sentence. Until we determine whether the statement constitutes a covenant breach, the disbursement remains on hold. All $150 million. Then the screen went black. The room stayed that way. Black, silent. Somewhere outside the frosted glass wall, a printer beeped. Phones buzzed with incoming Slack messages no one would answer. Rick opened his mouth, closed it. Once he had nothing left to say. At 11:21 a.m., my phone buzzed with a Slack message so panicked it practically sweated through the screen. Trisha, HR. Hey Denise, quick thing, can we grab 5 mins? Just a casual chat, nothing formal. Smiling face with smiling eyes, the smiley face at the end felt like a threat. I ignored it. 2 minutes later, an executive assistant I hadn't seen in months popped her head into my office, already out of breath. Denise, legal's requesting your presence. Upstairs, now. I closed my laptop slowly, stood up, straightened my blazer like it was armor. In the conference room, things had degraded into a full-blown meltdown masquerading as a strategy session. The company's outside legal team was dialed in, the CFO had untucked his shirt, and someone had cracked open a bottle of water like it was whiskey. Rick sat with his head in his hands, muttering something about intent and interpretation. The board's corporate counsel stood at the whiteboard, underlining the words covenant breach over and over like they might eventually disappear if she pressed hard enough. When I stepped in, all eyes turned to me like I was either the executioner or the last sane person left. Denise, the general counsel said, tight-lipped, we need timestamp confirmation on the email you sent to the bank. I nodded. 8:46 p.m. Synced to the company network time, pulled from the Wi-Fi access point logs. I also geotagged the submission if you need proof of location. She blinked. You geotagged it? I like to be thorough. No one laughed, no one smiled. That was fine. I wasn't in it for applause. Rick finally lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot, his confidence replaced with something twitchy and small. You knew this would happen, he said, not a question, not quite an accusation. More like a child trying to understand why the stove burned him. I knew what Clause 9.4 said, I replied. And I knew the timeline. He didn't answer. Just stared at the table like it might morph into a time machine and take him back to 5 minutes before he opened his mouth at the toast. At 11:46 a.m., the bank's legal team sent their follow-up. Subject, request for formal statement of intent to CEO, General Counsel, CFO, CC, Denise Carter, Body. As discussed, please provide a written account explaining the context of the 8:46 p.m. statement, let's toast the ones we've replaced, made by the CEO during the execution window. Clarify whether this was a formal operational remark, cultural sentiment, or otherwise. Disbursement will remain on hold until this determination is made. Rick paled. The lawyers started spinning language. Phrases like celebratory commentary and non-binding social engagement were thrown around like confetti made of desperation. Someone suggested attaching a disclaimer to all future speeches. And HR, sweet, useless HR, finally tried to step in. Trisha knocked on the glass and leaned in with that tight, chemically neutral smile. Denise, maybe we pause communications for now, just so we can align messaging across departments. I looked her dead in the eye. I already forwarded the entire message chain, clause references, and relevant document history to the board's legal counsel. She blinked. You did, 15 minutes ago. The silence that followed was delicious, crisp, like biting into a cold apple after a long hike through other people's incompetence. Trisha nodded slowly, as if trying to recall which HR policy covers when the quiet one sets the building on fire using only Outlook. The general counsel stepped in before HR could fake another smile. Denise, thank you, that'll be all for now. I nodded and turned to leave. Behind me, Rick finally broke. This is absurd, he muttered. It was a party, a joke. The CFO, still holding the printed email from the bank, whispered, it doesn't matter if it was a joke. They're not looking at tone, they're looking at timing. The tension in the room turned syrup thick. No one dared breathe too loud. Every click of a laptop key sounded like a gavel. Outside the room, I passed by Mia, hunched over her desk, frantically deleting social media posts. Travis was pacing, murmuring to himself, maybe it's not too late for crypto. And I returned to my office, sat down, opened my frosting folder, and quietly added one more file, Event Log Correspondence Board Review PDF, uploaded 12:04 p.m. I wasn't done yet, but the trap had teeth now, and the only way out was through the glass Rick had raised. At 2:07 p.m., the boardroom lights dimmed, not by design, just the kind of architectural hiccup that happens when tension crosses into biblical. The blinds were half shut against the glare, but it didn't matter. No one was looking outside. The only thing that mattered now was the voice on the screen. Daniel Strickland was back. Same tailored suit, same wire-rim glasses, same look of a man who'd seen this before, probably too many times. Bank lawyer by trade, executioner by circumstance. I'd like to read an email we received at 8:46 p.m. yesterday, he said calmly. Please listen closely. He adjusted his glasses, held the page like scripture. Hi Jill, hope all is well. I wanted to flag clause 9.4 in the disbursement agreement, as there may be potential confusion regarding verbal representations made during the active execution window. I've attached my notes and timestamps in case review is warranted. Please let me know if further clarity is needed. Best, Denise Carter silence. You could have heard Travis's hair gel melt. Rick was frozen in place, arms crossed so tight his shirt buttons were working overtime. His skin had gone the color of printer paper left in the sun too long. Splotchy and creased. The board sat stone-faced. No one moved, no one even looked at me. Daniel continued, this email was sent from your corporate IP address during the funding celebration, with location metadata verifying it originated at the event site. It references clause 9.4, which, per the agreement, governs the integrity of any operational statements made during the execution window. He paused. Then we need to confirm the timestamp of Mr. Reeves' remark. Let's toast the ones we've replaced. Rick exhaled like he'd been holding it since yesterday. It was a joke, he said, voice thin, desperate. We were drinking champagne. It wasn't a statement. It wasn't, come on, Daniel. We can't freeze 150 million over a toast, but no one backed him. Because now the bank wasn't asking for feelings. They were asking for facts, and they already had them. The CFO, still holding the printed chain of emails like it might electrocute him, whispered without looking up, that doesn't matter. Not with that clause. Not during the funding window. The legal counsel cleared her throat. Quiet. Surgical. Per the contract, she said, intent is irrelevant. If a remark is made by an authorized executive during the active window and can be reasonably interpreted as indicative of strategic policy or internal restructuring, qualifies, and the bank is well within its rights to initiate a hold pending review. Rick looked at her like she'd just translated his obituary. But I didn't mean it. No one answered. The board chair leaned forward, elbows on the table. So, what exactly did you say? Rick swallowed hard. I said, he closed his eyes. I said, let's toast the ones we've replaced. No one spoke. Daniel nodded on screen. Confirmed. That matches the video caption, the IP log, and the time Denise Carter's email was received. He folded his hands. We consider that a material representation of leadership transition during the covenant window. Unless your legal team wishes to dispute the interpretation in writing, funds will remain frozen. Disbursement will not proceed. The CFO's hands were trembling now. He turned his face away, blinking too fast. Someone cursed under their breath. Probably Vince. Rick slumped back in his chair like a puppet with the strings cut. For the first time since he stepped foot in this company, he had nothing clever left to say. No buzzwords, no motivational slogans, just the crumbling weight of $150 million evaporating in real time. The board slowly turned their gaze, not at Rick, not at each other, but toward legal. And me? I didn't say a damn thing. I didn't gloat. didn't smirk, didn't tap my fingers or raise an eyebrow or crack my knuckles like some movie villain waiting for the final monologue. I sat there, quiet, still, a calm, forgotten fixture in the corner, because I didn't need to be loud, I just needed to be right. Outside the window, traffic kept moving. Horns, sirens, life. Inside, no one breathed. Rick's champagne flute, half full, untouched, still sat on the corner of the table, casting a pale reflection in the polished wood. No one dared reach for it, because everyone knew that glass was now worth $150 million. And the woman they tried to replace? She was the only one who knew exactly what time it was. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.